we'll start our invocation with a beautiful song, or I would say the Lok Geet of BHU. So let me share the screen.
It is Kul Geet.
Yes, it is Kul Geet.
Kul Geet.
मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी ये तीन लोकों से न्यारी काशी सुज्ञान धर्म और सत्य राशि बसी है गंगा के रम्य तट पर ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी नए नहीं है ये गीत पत्थर है विश्वकर्मा का कार्य सुंदर रचे हैं विद्या के भव्य मंदिर ये सर्व सृष्टि की राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्व विद्या की राजधानी
So thank you so much for your kind attention. And we have another song for the invocation. So let me share this.
बुद्धं शरणं गच्छामि संघं शरणं गच्छामि धम्मं शरणं गच्छामि सम्यक् समबुद्धि तथागत तुम सम्यक् समबुद्धि तथागत तुम करुणा बरसाने वाले हो अज्ञान की घोर सघनतम में अज्ञान की घोर सघनतम में नव ज्योति जगाने वाले हो सम्यक समबुद्धि तथागत तुम करुणा बरसाने वाले हो
पापों की गठरी भारी हुई
पापों की गठरी भारी हुई
बहुल जी डगर है जीवन की
बहुल जी डगर है जीवन की अटकी है भंवर में मम नैया अटकी है भंवर में मम नैया तुम पार लगाने वाले हो सम्यक समबुद्ध तथागत तुम करुणा बरसाने वाले हो जीवन मृत्यु मृत्यु का फेर है क्या?
जीवन मृत्यु का फेर है क्या?
मैं पाप पुण्य में उलझा हूँ,
मैं पाप पुण्य में उलझा हूँ।
जीवन की हर एक उलझन को, जीवन की हर एक उलझन को तुम ही सुलझाने वाले हो। सम्यक समबुद्ध तथागत तुम करुणा बरसाने वाले हो।
कहीं जाति धर्म का विष फैला,
कहीं जाति धर्म का विष फैला,
कहीं ऊंच नीच का भेद प्रबल,
कहीं ऊंच नीच का भेद प्रबल। समता से सींच के इंसान को, समता से सींच के इंसान को इंसान बनाने वाले हो। सम्यक समबुद्धि तथागत तुम करुणा बरसाने वाले हो।
So, thank you so much for your kind attention. And with this song, we are going to start our session. And namaste, everybody. Good evening to all of you. I request respected participant to kindly mute themselves so far so that we can avoid this disturbances. Yes, thank you. I, Ranthir Gautam, Head of School of Humanities and Social Sciences of Raffles University, I welcome you. I also welcome you on behalf of Swadhyaya Sahachkara Circle for Creative Co-Learning, Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, Puducherry, and Chennai. Today, we are here for a special talk on social thought of A.K. Saran. Professor Avadh Kishore Saran, who wrote under the name A.K. Saran, was an eminent sociologist and one of the most important voices in the Hindu world on traditional thought. A.K. Saran's writings often covered the expositors of traditional teaching and perennial philosophy. We are going to have with excellent discussion on his thought, genesis of his thought for that matter. It's an honor and privilege to have available with us our distinguished speaker, Professor Ajit K. Pandey from Department of Sociology, Banaras Hindu University. We have another guest, a speaker, Dr. Muhammad Maroof Shah from Jammu and Kashmir. We are also delighted to have with us Dr. Amit Kumar Sharma from Center for Study of Social Systems, Jawaharlal Nehru. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. I extend my warm welcome to Honorable Justice Meena V. Gombar, former Chief Justice of Rajasthan High Court, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Raffles University, Professor Divakar Kohli, Professor Anant Kumar Giri, Professor at Madras Institute of Developmental Studies, and founding honorary executive trustee of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, and all the respected participants, viewers, and listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today's evening. Let me also give a brief introduction to our honorable speakers. Professor Ajit Kumar Pandey is a professor at Department of Sociology, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. His research areas include social theory and developmental issues, critique of subaltern studies, kinship and tribal policy, and gender studies. He has a specialization of research methodology. He completed his doctoral research on kinship and power structure among tribal societies, a complex area of sociology. Yes. Uh, we have another guest, Professor Dr. Muhammad Maroof Shah. He has master in philosophy as well as English literature, and uh, he did his PhD on a very topic, metaphysical appraisal of Samuel Beckett and Albert Camus. He has authored so many books and important articles. Let me also give a brief introduction to our Swadhyaya Sahachkara. Swadhyaya Sahachkara, co-learning circle of self and mutual studies. Swadhyaya Sahachkara is an initiative of studying and learning together self, culture, and societies and the world. Friends associated with this are eager to walk and mediate with new horizons of thinking, new movements of social and cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We study seekers such as Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chittaranjan Das, a seeker and creative thinker from Orissa, and many others from around the world. We also present our own writings and reflect upon our creativity together. We also invite seekers from different fields of life to share with us their visions, lives, sadhana, and struggle for creating a world of beauty, dignity, and dialogues. We meet every Sunday and sometimes on Wednesday. Now we are nurturing this dialogue in collaboration with School of Humanities and Social Sciences of Raffles University. With this small introduction, now I would like to invite Professor Anant Kumar Giri sir to kindly moderate the session. Sir, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Randy, and a warm welcome to all dear and respected friends present. A warm welcome to Professor Ajit Pandey, Dr. Muhammad Maroof Shah, and my dear friend Amit, Dr. Amit Kumar Sharma from Center for Social Studies, JNU. So it is really a joy to be together this afternoon, walking and meditating the living thought of Professor A.K. Saran. And in whose thought, I mean, thought itself becomes alive. I had the joy to meet with Professor Saran uh, in Allahabad at the G.B. Pant Social Science Institute, where around 91, 92, Professor Saran had come and had made a presentation. So this afternoon, we are very fortunate to be enriched by Professor Pandey, Maroof, and also Amit, who also has very deeply cultivated these modes of inquiry right from our days together as fellow students of sociology and life from Delhi School of Economics, beginning from 1986. So the way we would move ahead this afternoon is that it will be enriching to listen to Professor Pandey to begin with for half an hour or so, and also Maroof for half an hour, and Amit for 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes of discussion. And then we would join the conversation. It is a very fascinating theme before us. And Professor Saran, I was having a look at one of his last book called Sociology of Knowledge and Traditional Thought, and to which Professor G.C. Pandey has written a foreword. And in Professor Pandey's foreword, Professor Pandey is writing just to situate Professor Saran's thought and work in a wider perspective, he's saying that thinkers like Plato and others from all traditions, whether it is Kautilya from India or Confucius and Lao Tse from, from China, what he calls as the characteristic of any traditional civilization is that they do not make a radical separation between reality and goodness. And this is a theme that we can explore to what extent it helps us in understanding the quest of Professor Saran. The other thought that Professor Pandey writes, which is I think very deeply challenging, is he's writing that tradition as well as modernity have an ideal meaning which is never fully realized in history. Therefore, the dialectic of the ideal and the historical. Therefore, if as Professor Saran makes an axiological critique of modernity, some foundational critique of modernity, but then the question remains that both tradition and modernity, when they are embodied in the historical, they are far from realizing the ideal potential that we have. And the third very generic question to all of us is that sometimes the whole question of the absolute that is being invoked, that absolute leads to absolutism. And whether in our exposition of tradition, there is a little bit of challenge of the absolutism. And therefore, as Professor Saran himself in his work, Sociology of Knowledge, which really began long time ago, around 1960, and no wonder, then he interacts with the ideas of Karl Mannheim. And Karl Mannheim makes a distinction between relativism and relationism. And therefore, any engagement with knowledge, whether it is from traditional perspective or modern perspective, that how does it embrace the responsibility of the relational, going beyond its own self-confident construction of oneself like tradition, or self-confident vilification of the other like knowledge. When we are engaging with traditional thought or tradition thought, of course, things like religion, metaphysics are very important. And Professor Pandey suggests, and many of us realize, that modernity its own taken for granted superiority of itself and exclusion of life world as religion and the metaphysical constitutes a problem. At the same time, how do we engage with the metaphysical? So that itself is an open question. So as we know, in Western thought, there is also critique of the metaphysical. But while critique of the metaphysical, whether starting from Martin Heidegger, the great philosopher, or in recent times or after Heidegger, whether it is Derrida, critique of the metaphysical, or whether it is Jürgen Habermas, its own critique of the metaphysical, nonetheless poses to us the question of that how do we engage with our empirical reality and layers of the metaphysical and the real, and these are open questions. So as we move on, as knowledge is a very important frame of conversation here, I was also remembering uh, a few thoughts about knowledge. For example, I was remembering this paragraph from Henry David Thoreau, where he writes, "My desire for knowledge is intermittent, but my desire to bathe my head in atmospheres unknown to my feet is perennial and constant. The highest that we can attain to is not knowledge, but sympathy with intelligence. I do not know that this higher knowledge amounts to anything more definite than a novel and grand surprise on a revelation of insufficiency of all that we called knowledge before. A discovery that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in our philosophy." Again, Henry David Thoreau, way back many years ago, is writing, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in our philosophy. It is the lighting up of the mist by the sun live free child of the mist, and with respect to knowledge, we are all children of the mist. We are all children of the mist. And I am also remembering this profound challenge from Jürgen Habermas, where he writes, why should the hermeneutic model of understanding, which is derived from everyday conversation, and since Humboldt, the great German thinker, has been methodology refined from the practice of textual interpretation, suddenly break down at the boundaries of our own culture, of our own way of life and tradition. So as we are engaging with Professor Saran's work, it is just an humble question, a query, that the hermeneutics of textual interpretation that is employed here, is it breaking down at the boundaries of our own tradition, or this hermeneutics become a part of global conversations of traditions and culture? And as we do that, the whole challenge of critique is very important. Critique, creativity, and transformation. As Ashish Nandi had written quite many years ago, almost 40 years ago, the challenge of critical traditionalism. And how do we engage with thought and tradition? How does it embody a practice of critical traditionalism? So with these offerings, with these submissions, I invite Professor Pandey most cordially and respectfully to kindly.
Thank you very much, Professor Giri sir. Thank you. I'm also extending my thanks to Dr. Randi Kumar Gautam sir and the institutions which are involved in this kind of academic venture. Time is very short. I like to be within the time period of half an hour time. Let me start that it was in 1994. Am I clear in my communications?
Yes,
Yes, sir. You are
Some problem? Hello? Are you
Yes.
You are
hearing me?
clear. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes,
It
yes.
was in, I was speaking of that
Very, very well,
there was
very well.
some problem in the microphone, I don't know. It was in 1994 at the University of Lucknow when I met Professor Saran, first of all, for the first time. And that period of time, he was delivering D.P. Mukherjee's memorial lecture in the Department of Sociology, Lucknow University. I was attending his lecture. His talk astonished me with his position, maintaining the incompatibility of tradition and modernity. He's one of the statements that I still remember, that if Hinduism is alive, modernity and modernization will not be accepted. It appeared, this statement of A.K. Saran appeared to me very, very anachronistic at first, but it prepared me to ponder over his deep understanding. I don't know, simply I wanted to know what prompted him to come out with this kind of statement, which appeared to be very controversial. According to Saran's own account, and somehow by God's grace, like all others around him, you could, from his very childhood, suspect the incongruity of the whole matter. He was taught, and in his juvenile period, while failing to get from any school teachers satisfying answers to his serious questions arising in his mind that period of time, he had a momentous encounter with one of A.K. Saran's writings that is titled Art and Swadeshi. Must be knowing, you must be familiar with this contributions of Kumar Swami Sahab at his elder brother's library. This I'm telling you from the narrations of, from the statement of Professor A.K. Saran himself, which left him not any ready-made answer. Indeed, Professor Saran said he could not understand the meaning of what then strangely impressed him until long after. But the deep, there is Hindi word, some wake, the unexpected experience in which his very being was second to its roots, which after that remained in him to to operate as heaven for the ongoing awakening to the truths. Since then, that was a great incident in his lifetime. Since then, his intellectual life has been marked by a number of such remarkable encounters with the inspiring, insightful works, not only of the contemporary traditional masters, but also various eminent modern thinkers whose insights he found, though uttered from the centers of modern world, lead one beyond modernism when seriously pursued. Indeed, in his inner sense, to be struck initially by sutras, our sutras from Shastras and Upanishads, pregnant with inexhaustively rich implications buried under their apparently non-consequential surfaces, in his capacity to bring them out of the way that is both faithful to their unfathomable profundities and subtleties, and highly relevant to our vital existential issues, as well as in his unsparing penetration into erroneous statements to reveal at once the source of their seeming plausibility, how they are in truth stultifying themselves. So in all these respects, his A.K. Saran's manner of reading text is marvelous. It is, in a word, can be said that he was trying to carry out learning through unlearning through learning. In this way, the modality of Saran's intellectual pursuit has been preeminently original. And apart from being one of the exponents of contemporary traditional coach, Saran cannot be distributed under any usual genealogical classifications of academic schools. Neither he was Indian nor Western. This is what he used to speak of, that I don't belong to any of these categories. Moreover, full consciousness of his difficulties and limitations, he accepted his intellectual calling not as seeking to join in some esoteric or monastic circles, if at all, if any, but as remaining in the midst of this anti-traditional world to fight it from within. And hence, being a university scholar of modern social science, so as to break it up, even if such a venture may sound extremely idealistic or unrealistic at times. In the context of the contemporary Indian intellectual world, Saran's emergence seems to have been, therefore, almost that of a mutant, if I may say so. Perhaps his extraordinary gift of rigorous dialectical thinking may be seen as having his latent root in the underground
Randir, can you hear?
No, yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Some
Yes, sir.
disturbances. Actually, light went off.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Yes, sir. You're audible.
So I was speaking about that in the context of many contemporary Indian intellectual, our Indian intellectual world. Saran's appearance seems to have been in this way almost that of a mutant. This is what I spoke. Now, perhaps his extraordinary gift of rigorous dialectical thinking may be seen as having its latent root in the underground stream of Indian intellectual tradition, such as manifested in many prasang of Nagarjuna.
Not audible, sir. Not audible, sir.
He's
Hello.
coming. Yes, I think he's coming.
Yes, just wait. I think he is rejoining.
Oh,
Meanwhile, you can translate some of his parts, sir, to our
yes, yes.
audience. Yes.
Yeah.
I
So, yes. Yes,
tried to
yes.
co-opt him into
Mhm.
their circles.
Yes, Professor Pandey. We cannot hear you always. There is a little bit of problem. Can you hear us?
I think his network is not well, sir.
So, in the meantime, I can make a translation. So, dear friends, so as with all our dialogue, we translate the thoughts of our friends into Odia, as some of our friends from Odisha, they are enriched with the translation of the thought that we discuss. So to all non-Odia friends, our profound sense of gratitude for your generosity. So ଆମର ଭାଇ ଭଉଣୀ ମାନେ ଆଜି ଆମର ଏଇ ସ୍ୱାଧ୍ୟାୟ ସହଚକ୍ରର ଏହି ସଂଳାପରେ ଆମେ ଶ୍ରୀଯୁକ୍ତ ଏକେ ଶରନ ତାଙ୍କର ଚିନ୍ତା ବିଷୟରେ ଆଲୋଚନା କରୁ। ଏକେ ଶରଣ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ନୌର ୟୁନିଭର୍ସିଟି ଅଫ୍ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ନୌ ସୋସିଓଲୋଜି ପଢ଼ାଉଥିଲେ ଏବଂ ତାଙ୍କର ଯେଉଁ ସୋସିଓଲୋଜିଟା ସେଇଟା ଆମର ପରମ୍ପରାଗତ ଜ୍ଞାନ ଯାହାକୁ ଆମେ ଯେଉଁ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ ବୋଲି
Has
କହୁଛୁ
been unlearning through learning, and his accepted mission in academia, fighting from within all these coverage of one on the one essential feature of the critique of modernity, that it is intended to be internal critique. Now, I would like to focus on the, to be more specific, on the uniqueness of universal significance of Saran's critique of modernity. And in order to do so, I will begin by just recapitulating very briefly how Saran has put the root predicament of his own countrymen from the lucid and keen awareness of which his whole intellectual existential endeavor has started. The bottomless plight into which Saran found the people in contemporary India were trapped into wage. On the one hand, while the perennial tradition and the ultimate transcendent source of the meaningfulness of man's life ever remains, its historical modality given to man as a temporal existence has been in utter decay, without which any life, qua human being, is rendered impossible this side of sainthood on earth, but which precisely because of being only transcendently given. And this signifies the mystery of bridging the absolute discontinuity between the trans-temporal essence and the temporal existence. This cannot be regenerated or recreated by man himself, left to his own resources. Professor Saran time and again reinforces. On the other hand, however, what has been only available there instead, first compelled to adopt by the British rule, and then being willingly sought to be introduced by a majority of post-independent political leaders and intellectuals, namely modernity is full of self-inconsistencies. Indeed, its fundamental idea of self-grounding, that is autonomy without depending on the transcendently revealed and traditionally inherited spiritual authority. In other words, we can speak of the hubristic notion of man as a creator of his own world and history. This simply does not make sense. It is thus a veritable Davis bargain through which a seeming transient gain is delusively pursued at the cost of most vital, essential thing for man to be himself. And remembering of the divine origin, this is what I mean here. Thus, in this way, in the end, at the cost of everything, everything is taking place at the cost of everything. In this double impasse, The first phase, the phase of the loss of living traditional society in itself, is not still hopeless. For the very awareness of this painful loss, so long as we do not try to blur it by various sentimental substitutions, can always lead us to the remembrance of our divine source, who is infinitely. Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Hello.
we can. Yes, we can hear you. Please, we can hear you. Please
That is,
continue.
we are talking about by our total repentance, and this is terminology. This is being explained by a terminology metanoia. This is first of all being used by Kumar Swami Sahab, borrowed from Kumar Swami by Professor A.K. Sharan, and only with which previously inoperative causes are brought into play with new results. This is what Kumar Swami time and again speaks of. However, to Sharan's deep sorrow, almost all the political leaders and intellectuals in our contemporary India, with the exception of Mahatma Gandhi, have obscured the real root of their predicament, replacing it self-deceivingly with the problem of how to well achieve the synthesis of tradition and modernity. That is, how to manage to get the most favorable terms of that bargain, instead of having the courage to annul the delusive, compact itself altogether without examining whether the latter has a coherent case at all, to say nothing of the logical compatibility of the two. There is no point at this juncture to speak about the logical compatibility and the degree of that. This accustomed insensitivity, this fatal lack of clear, consistent thinking among modern Indian intellectuals, especially marking their generally ad hoc, piecemeal approaches to the post-independent national project of modernizations, in which Saran sees a sign of a continuation of cowardice come self-complacence, as he used to call always Nilkant syndrome, with which Hindus have characteristically responded to the Muslim and the British domination, operates as a kind of structural falsification of the reality, through which the huge exploitation of people and nature is tolerated in the name of transition to a fully developed country, of pursuing freedom and justice, but the price that's actually paid in the process is masked by politicization of surviving religious feelings. Now, at this juncture, it is significant to mention that this understanding of actualities by Professor Saran is neither a matter of explanatory hypothesis. This is what I'm telling you in reference to Professor Giri's just now communications, that it is neither a matter of explanatory hypothesis of a positivist or hermeneutic social scientist, nor a transcendently revealed decree of a prophet, which mantle he never pretends to wear, but an expression of the unavoidable reality of the dire wretchedness in which his whole existence is increasingly involved. As a matter of fact, herein lies the deepest derivation of Saran's distress. The traditional world to which he knows he intrinsically belongs is no longer accepted as a bare survival, and living this side of sainthood, he has no power and authority to create a new traditional space of his own. Whereas the so-called modern and modernizing world by which he finds himself actually surrounded is fundamentally unintelligible to him. He simply cannot understand why his fellow intellectuals can go with such a meaningless idea of the synthesis of tradition and modernity, together with all modern social scientific methodologies, if they are not merely victims in disguise of the preemptory force of global imperial violence. Therefore, literally nowhere to belong for him on earth. Instead of being recalled, the eternal in which he has his roots has been ostracized as bygones by the present, and the present he has to live in remains ever alien to him. This is the unmitigated misery that Saran, as a Hindu survivor, has been condemned to suffer. And his grandeur, which only has ever intensified his pain, lies in his poignantly clear perception of its unprecedentedly formidable nature, which is neither a third person's observations from an outsider standpoint, nor a verdict from on high. It is a cry of heart amidst the incomprehensible wilderness of time, of which his eternal critique is simply a logico-philosophical express. What is piteously ironical in all this is that whereas the misery that Saran bears in full awareness of its abysmal depths is in reality the very root predicament of all the contemporary people who are entrapped into modern scientific industrial civilization. Saran's upright voice has been always bypassed as something impertinent or anachronistic by all those who embrace modern concepts and a self-deluding enhancement, which, however, paradoxically and tragically blunts their own real suffering by covering it. In this respect, we may say here is a certain analogy with the case of our family with Socrates, who on the strength of the recognition of his own ignorance, pursued the dialogical quest in the negative form that tolerates no pretense, and who, remaining true to himself, accepted and fulfilled this mission only as a midwife in the clear understanding that its relationship is the highest that one human being can sustain to another. This is, however, with this difference of the task among others, that while Socrates simply left of all scientific investigations so as to concentrate on the quest for one thing needful, Saran has to face up to the foundations of the whole modern disciplines in order to even to clear the path just for starting that quest. Now, I like to summarize, I like to conclude with a view to seeing the nature of Saran's internal critique of modernity. I like to shed some light on some aspects, mainly the three aspects, though all are inseparably intertwined.
Sir, you are muted.
Saran's understanding of the predicament of contemporary man. Number one is the flashlight, that he always used to speak of the flashlight. The flashlight is 1,000 times as disastrous as the gloom. And that the gloom is the factor of the absence of living tradition itself. For the former removes from our consciousness the very necessity and possibility of seeking the genuine light, while creating a deceptive sense of immunity against all the sacrifices actually made for maintaining it. This decisive recognition is one of the fundamentals that run through all Saran's works attempting an internal critique. This underlying which is the basic principles that awareness of the truth matters before everything else. And that is why he has persistently and always strictly questioned whether presuppositions of a given thought system are coherent at all. Though logic is not at all, not all things, something that internally contradicts itself can be pursued only at some real cost. When it is a question of the foundation of the whole civilization, inconsistencies at the level of its principles never fail to bring forth tremendous, the most ruinous practical results. And what is more, the core ideas of modernity involve something utterly unintelligible per se, that things that even do not make sense, of which the manifested effect is nothing but the unprecedented global violence that is infinitely potentiated. In this way, Saran's critique of modernity meant to reveal its internal self-defeating contradictions on its own ground, and not to attack it from some external point of view in terms of a certain presupposed criterion of desirability. And this strictly internal critique is sustained only by dialectic, as Professor Giri has spoken of, as a support for a poetic way. That is the dialectic which is true to man's gifted self-reflective intelligence and oriented towards the transcendent source. And accordingly, to say that Saran has critiqued modernity from the traditional point of view is already somewhat misleading. In reality, neither modernity nor tradition is a point of view. The former is no more than a congeries of various self inconsistent postulates that much disguised nonsense, a phantom which has no coherent case to constitute a point of view, and the latter is simply another name of the transcendent universal truths only within and are the modalities of. Professor Saran used to speak of the this is transcendental universalism. This is philosophia perennis, which diverse particular points of view, are possible. And thus Saran's internal critique breaks through the very dichotomy of modernity and tradition. As a matter of fact, it was only by its initial supposed pairing with tradition that modernity could have established itself. The wholly unwarranted, impossible pairing on which all delusive talks like that of modernization and synthesis of to thrive. This is all. There are many things that I wanted to talk of, like, for instance, Saran on Indian tradition and sociology in India. But the time given is only half an hour time. I cannot now dwell on that. So kindly bear with me with these communications of mine. And I'm really once again much thankful to all of you, specifically Professor Giri, who has given me this platform to share my ideas on great sociologists of the country and abroad, Professor A.K. Sharan. Thank you very much once again to all of you.
Thank you so much, Professor Pandey. And I was just sharing that your thoughts. I was beginning to translate it into Odia very quickly, and I will do it. And since you also wanted to share about Saran on Indian tradition and sociology, since it is a very important thing, so I would request you to kindly take 5 minutes to give main points about that, because we are trying to understand A.K. Saran. So
I'm happy, I'm obliged to. Actually, Saran signifies a break from the main tradition of Indian sociology. He begins, if you look at his contributions, by posing the fundamental question, and that is largely based on these questions. I'll tell you that he has shared these questions with me on my personal interactions with him. Number one is, can indigenous systems of tradition produce support or coexist with totally alien systems of modernity? In the terminology of modern sociology, another question, can there be a genuine structural transformation without destroying the very basis of system maintenance and performance? In the specific context of India, he speaks of, can the Western impact and the attendant internalization of the West lead to the modernization of Hindu tradition? These are the questions he always used to share with me in my personal interactions with him. In the current Indian sociology, I like to dwell on this for 2 minutes. The answer to each of these questions is broadly in the affirmative. It is still not fashionable in modern social science tradition of India to condemn Hinduism, although some operating outside the boundaries of sociological profession have tried this, like Modi, another is Das Gupta, is from other discipline, to express an avast allegiance to Hinduism or Westernization is, of course, tactless, if not outright absurd. In the modernized consciousness of an Indian sociologist, tradition is fully compatible with modernity. It is strictly in this context that synthesis and adaptation have become two most popular components of modernization theory in our country. Behind this popularity lies what Saran calls a false consciousness. Look at his contributions. Time and again that he holds false consciousness responsible for this kind of relationship between modernity and tradition in our country. It is consciousness because it involves modern man's little faith in his own tradition. And it is false, Saran says, because it selects and thereby distorts social reality, qua reality, by imposing modernistic criteria to understand and evaluate traditional systems. Lot of articles, lot of papers he has contributed on this issue. In this framework, tradition becomes valuable only as an instrument of modernity. Thus, therefore, apparently simple-looking proposition, in fact, hides profoundly disturbing implications implicit in that. And these implications need to be studied at two levels. First, at the empirical level, second is at the methodological level. At the empirical level, What remains at Hindu tradition in the modern world of Indian sociologists is restricted to religious fairs and fasts. Indians are more prone to fairs and they are going on fast time and again. At a slightly deeper level, an Indian social scientist may express an irrepressible joy on seeing a fatalist Hindu peasant accepting fertilizers and pesticides. This act in itself seems to confirm all these predispositions about modernization of Hindu traditions. At the methodological level, Hinduism is delinked from its institutional base and is studied only as a congeries of disparate acts and beliefs which can be used and abused in the process of modernization. And this use may vary in its substantive meaning, taking one of the three forms. Number one is where Hinduism is only temporarily performing certain dysfunctional roles, that is the family planning. Example is. Number two is where Hinduism has been safely pushed to the periphery of Indian society, particularly in the case of private worship. And number three, where Hinduism has already become a vehicle of westernization process itself. And that is the example is caste and politicization in our country. From Saran's perspective, this delusion of tradition is self-destructive. For while it creates a comfortable illusion of synthesis, it also demeans the tradition and deflects societies away from modernity. One is neither here nor there. Stagnation looks progressive, and the drift appears as a forward movement Saran speaks of. Hindu tradition, according to Saran, as a matter of fact, is unabashedly traditional and not conducive to orthogenetic evolution of a rational modern worldview. This thesis had these three corollaries. First is India has already adopted a certain non-Hindu model of modernity. Indian tradition clearly has no role to play in it. Second, Saran speaks of India must realize that contemporary process of modernization is itself fraught with grave internal limitations and contradictions. And the third, he speaks of if, however, India is still serious for its own model, it must evolve its own modern worldview, which is as full and consistent as traditional Hindu system. And at this point, it would be useful to add a certain historical dimension to this discussions. But once again, I can't linger it because the time given is only half an hour time, 5 minutes. However, I quote one statement by Saran that Hindu religion and society are inseparable. This unity was disrupted during India's encounter with the Mughals and Muslims. And under the Muslim rule, Hindu reality was artificially passed into an inner and outer life, initiating a process of disintegration and falsification, symbolized most forcefully by the Bhakti movement. Anyway, this falsification needs to be elaborated. Any other time, I'll certainly like to speak on that if the time given. This is what I'm really, once again, I'm thankful to Professor Giri who has given me some time, because the idea of Saran also is pregnant with certain kind of limitations. That's why approaching Saran's perspective is also required for the fuller understanding of Saran's perspective and his social philosophy. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Pandey. And I hope even during our discussion time,
I'll be here. I'll love to be here.
We would have some moment to touch on the historical aspect that you want
yes,
to tell us. We would have time. So lovely. So I will just take 5-7 minutes to translate some of your thoughts to Odia. Many of our friends would be enriched by this translation. ତେଣୁ ଭାଇ ଭଉଣୀ ମାନେ ମୁଁ କହୁଥିଲି ଯେ ଆଜିର ଆମର ଆଲୋଚନାଟି ପ୍ରଫେସର A.K. ଶରଣଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ଆଉ A.K. ଶରଣ ସିଏ ସୋସିଓଲୋଜି ପଢାଉଥିଲେ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ନୌ ୟୁନିଭର୍ସିଟିରେ ଆଉ ସେ ତାଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ସମାଜ ବିଷୟରେ ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତାଟି ସେ ଯୋଉ ବିଶେଷ କରି ଆଧୁନିକତା ମାନେ ଜାଣିଥିବେ ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ପରମ୍ପରାରେ ଜନ୍ମ ଆମେ ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରୁ ଅନେକ Ranveer, you please mute everybody. Ranveer, except myself. Ranveer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have already muted.
Kindly. So, and dear friends, do not unmute unless you are invited to unmute. So, ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଗୋଟେ ଜୀବନରେ ଜନ୍ମ ହେଇଛୁ। ଆମ ଭିତରୁ ଅନେକ ମା ଶ୍ରୀ ଅରବିନ୍ଦଙ୍କୁ ପଢିଛୁ। ଶ୍ରୀ ଅରବିନ୍ଦଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ଆମର ଭାରତୀୟ ପରମ୍ପରାକୁ ନେଇ ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତନ, ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ପରମ୍ପରାକୁ ନେଇ, ପରମ୍ପରା ଗୋଟେ ଭାରି ବିଶାଳ କଥା। ତେଣୁ ଏକେ ଶରଣ ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଯେ ଆଧୁନିକ ସମାଜର ଯୋଉ ସବୁ କଥା ରହିଛି, ଆଧୁନିକତା ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ଅନେକ ଇନକନସିଷ୍ଟେନ୍ସି ଶବ୍ଦଟା ଅର୍ଥ ହଉଛି ଯେ ଗୋଟେ ଜିନିଷ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ଖାପ ଖାଉ, ଏମିତି ଅଖାପ ଜିନିଷ ସବୁ ରହିଛି। ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଶବ୍ଦ ଆମର ସ୍ପିକର ପ୍ରଫେସର ପାଣ୍ଡେ ବ୍ୟବହାର କରୁଥିଲେ, ଇନକଂଗ୍ରୁଇଟି, ଗୋଟେ ଜିନିଷ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ମିଳୁନି। ତେଣୁ ପ୍ରଫେସର ପାଣ୍ଡେଙ୍କର ଆଜି ଶରଣଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ତାଙ୍କର ଚିନ୍ତାର ଯୋଉ ଆଲୋଚନା ଥିଲା, ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଯେ ପ୍ରଫେସର ଶରଣ ଯୋଉ ଆଧୁନିକ ସମାଜ ଏବଂ ଆଧୁନିକ ଚିନ୍ତା ତା ଭିତରେ ବହୁତ ଅନ୍ତର୍ଦ୍ୱନ୍ଦ୍ୱ ରହିଛି, ଇନକନସିଷ୍ଟେନ୍ସି ରହିଛି। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଆଧୁନିକତାର ଯୋଉ ସୀମିତତା, ସେଟା ଆଧୁନିକତା ଜ୍ଞାନର ଯୋଉ ସବୁ ଭୂମି ମାନ ରହିଛି, ଯୋଉ ଏସମ୍ପସନ୍ସ ମାନ ରହିଛି, ଯୋଉ ସବୁ ଧାରଣା ମାନ ରହିଛି, ସେଇ ଧାରଣା ମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଯୋଉ ଅଖାପ ଥାଏ, ଗୋଟେ ଜିନିଷ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ଖାପ ଖାଉନି, ତାକୁ ଆମେ ଇଂରାଜୀରେ ଇଣ୍ଟରନାଲ କ୍ରିଟିକ୍ ଅଫ ମଡର୍ନିଟି ବା ଓଡ଼ିଆରେ ତାକୁ ଗୋଟେ ମାନେ ଆଧୁନିକତାର ତାର ଗୋଟେ ଅନ୍ତଃ ସମୀକ୍ଷା। ଆ ଅର୍ଥ ନୁହେଁ ଯେ ଆଧୁନିକ ସମାଜର ସମୀକ୍ଷା ଆମେ ପରମ୍ପରାରୁ କରୁଛୁ। ଅର୍ଥାତ୍ ପାରମ୍ପରିକ ସମାଜରେ ଆପଣମାନେ ଅନୁଭବ କରୁଥିବେ ଯେ ଆମର ପରିବାରର ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ ଭୂମିକା ରହିଛି, ଆଉ ଆମର ଜାତି ଧର୍ମର ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ ଭୂମିକା ରହିଛି। ଗାଁ, ଆମେ ଅଧିକାଂଶ ଲୋକ ଗାଁରେ ରହିଛୁ। ତେଣୁ ଯୋଉଟେ ଆମର ଯୋଉ ଗୋଟେ ବାହାଘରଟିଏ ହବ, ସେ ବାହାଘରଟା କେବଳ ଗୋଟେ ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିର ବାହାଘର ନୁହେଁ, ସେଟା ଗୋଟେ ଗାଁର ବାହାଘର। କିନ୍ତୁ ଆଧୁନିକ ସମାଜରେ ଆଉ ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିଟା ହିଁ ନିଷ୍ପତ୍ତି ନଉଛି, ଉଦାହରଣ ସ୍ୱରୂପ। ଆଉ ତେଣୁ ଆଧୁନିକ ଆଉ ପରମ୍ପରା ଭିତରେ ଯୋଉ କଥାଟି, ସେଟା ଆବହମାନ କାଳରୁ ଚାଲି ଆସିଛି। ତେଣୁ ଏକେ ଶରଣଙ୍କର ସୋସିଓଲୋଜିରେ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଆଧୁନିକ ସମାଜ, ଆଧୁନିକ ଚିନ୍ତାରେ ଯୋଉ ଅଖାପ ଜିନିଷ ସବୁ ରହିଛି, ତା ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ପରମ୍ପରାକୁ ଆମେ କେମିତି ବୁଝିବା, ପରମ୍ପରା ସହିତ କେମିତି ଭାବିବା, ଆଉ ସେଇ ସବୁ ନେଇକି ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଯେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଯେ ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷରେ ଯୋଉ ଆଧୁନିକତା ଆସୁଛି, ସେଇଟାକୁ କେମିତି, ଆଉ ସେ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ସମାଜ କଥା କହୁଥିଲେ, ଯୋଉ କଥା ଭିତରେ ଆହୁରି ଅଧିକ ଭାବିବାର କଥା ସବୁ ରହିଛି। ଆଉ ତାପରେ ସେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଯେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଆଉ ସବୁ ଭିତରେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଭାରତ ବର୍ଷ ଯୋଉ ଆଧୁନିକତା ଗୋଟେ ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରିବ, ସେ ଆଧୁନିକତାଟା ଗୋଟେ ଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାରର ହବ, ପରମ୍ପରା ସହିତ ଆଧୁନିକତା। ତେଣୁ ବହୁତ ସଂକ୍ଷେପରେ ମୁଁ ପ୍ରଫେସର ଶରଣଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ବିଷୟରେ କହୁଛି, ଆପଣମାନେ ସମସ୍ତ ଧ୍ୟାନର ସହିତ ଶୁଣିବେ, ଶୁଣିଲେ କିଛି ବୁଝିପାରିବେ ଏବଂ ପରେ ପରସ୍ପର ସହିତ ଅଧିକ କଥା ହେବା। So now I invite Maroof, please, our dear Muhammad Maroof Saha, the Sufi thinker from Kashmir. Maroof. Is Maroof here?
Yes, I am live.
Please, Maroof, please enrich us.
Yes, sir. yes. There was some charging issue. I just resolved it. So I have to speak?
Yes.
Yes, please. We are eagerly waiting for.
Wonderful. So it's in fact an honor to be in your presence. I've been hearing. I wanted to hear from the learned speaker who was just speaking. I wish you could have continued. There are all limitations of time, but I've been always wondering why Saran is not being talked about. That has been an anxiety. In a way, he has been marginalized from the academia, I think, but the way Ananta Kumar is still being in a way read and projected and somehow being in a way accommodated or being acknowledged or owned. Saran has been neglected, so we should say recklessly, and I think it is undefensible. At least Indian academia, Indians should have been able to give to have to project him better. To I think one of the greatest voices in India who applied the Philosophia Perennis, the world of tradition, to a particular field and then came with brilliant insights. When we read him, he's a we can say a world-class thinker. Such rigor, such brilliance, and such style, the way he confidently approaches issues. So it is, but somehow I feel has not been given the space and he's not being read. I have been always puzzled about it. But when I heard that you are organizing something on him, I was so eager to be part of it, to listen at least. Now I think a few points on the talk I have already, the topic I have been assigned. Saran questions two key meta-narratives, I would say. See, we can say the secularism is the larger meta-narrative of modernity. Enlightenment post in it's all, and I think the world of religions, the traditional people, they have been pushed to the margin so much, and they have been forced to appropriate this language of secularism. So they have been trying to say that, for example, Islam is secular, Hinduism is secular, as if the secularism is the governing myth. It is the holy cow. Now, Saran's importance is he simply smashes it down to the ground. He's not comfortable with the term, with its genealogy, with its ideological baggage, so much surrounding it. Then, religion as expounded by the right, by the revivalists, most of them. So, Saran, we know he has been critical of Marx and the left, and he's in a way sharply critical of the right as well. So, if secularism is problematic, so is religious fundamentalism equally, from a traditional point of view, which is Saran's. Now, to understand Saran better, we need to understand Goinun, Schumann, Ananda Kumaraswamy, and all those people whom he quotes and refers to.
Maroof is in a meditative silence.
Maybe because of the inconsistency in network connection.
No, he is in touch with transcendence,
Yeah.
or he is in the embrace of the transcendence.
Mhm.
He's coming.
Yes, he has joined. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had lost connection.
Yes, I know.
Sorry, I had lost connection. I am audible now?
Yes,
Yes.
you are audible, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. So I think a few points we should be able to try to see. For example, I was also trying to ask Ananda, Giri ji, for example, why they have not as social justice taken him so seriously. I have been asking about our Kashmir University and Central University colleagues who teach sociology, that they hardly know about Saran. So terrible network problem.
Yes, sir. If there is a network problem, then you can just mute your camera and just open your mic. Yes.
Okay, I will just, there is. So you are able to hear me, then I will continue. Otherwise,
Yes,
there is some problem with my camera.
Okay.
Yes,
No.
you can
Yes.
put your
So I
camera
will be
up.
just, I will be just speaking.
Yes.
So Saran, while agreeing with Peter Winch's skepticism about the idea of social science, so he's attacking the very foundations, the way it is mainstream academia is pursuing sociology. But that idea has been, in a way, has not been heard. I was seeing what Professor T.N. Madan has written rightly about him. that Saran's writings and methodology have not had any significant impact on the work of sociologists and social anthropologists in India. They have been regrettably considered too heavily metaphysical to be of interest. So in fact, it is a problem of modernity that it is somehow skeptical of the metaphysical. And then there are a barrage of problems which arise because of this bias against the metaphysics. So Saran is primarily for metaphysics, and metaphysics is what has been, in a way, in such disrepute following Enlightenment, and especially in the more recently. I liked an expression of Professor Misra. He compares his life as a series of active waiting in the darkness of the time, to use the words of Simone Weil, and the life in which he remained to his inceptive wisdom that all thinking is a form of prayer, and there is one and only one prayer for right understanding of reality and for relating it to with courage and dignity. Now, the central thesis of traditions is to be open to the real. That is what is called surrender to God, accepting the truth, or whatever we call it. Now, the central thesis of modernity is a Faustian project. It wants us to control the real. It wants us to use it for some utilitarian or whatever end, ideological end. So, is this thinking possible? I think Heidegger was trying to say something similar when, for example, he would say that thinking has been banned in the contemporary world. And he called for that meditative thinking, for which rationalism is such a, and science is such a huge obstacle. So if we say all thinking is a form of prayer, then there should be no one in the world who should be who should disagree with Saran on this point. If all thinking is a form of prayer, and thinking defines the what is human, and who would question the right understanding of reality? For Buddha's eightfold path, we know the right understanding is the key to salvation. Now, modern man, in somehow he assumes that he is somehow trying to understand reality. But deeper down, as postmodernists have rightly pointed out, the primary project has been to control the reality, not to understand it. That's why reason, in fact, it has been Muslim scholastics, theologians, and perennialists all have pointed out, reason is fundamentally a passive faculty. It has to receive, and that is to be really human. That's why to be human is to be a creature, not the creator. But the problem is when we have that huge dichotomy between intellect and reason, and we have it's somehow the rationalism is the dominant worldview, despite it is postmodern critiques and all that. About that, Saran would say it is more irrational or sub-rational, these postmodern valorization of so-called critiques of reason. Even Bergson has been severely criticized by major traditionalist thinkers. They accuse him of speaking of the sub-rational, not the supra-rational. So Nietzsche has been heavily criticized. So, but the problem is then how do we have to connect to the whole this trajectory? Now, if we want to really locate Saran, the Saran is not a lone man in the desert crying in the desert. I think he is one with the great thinkers of modernity who have all been trying to. I am audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Kindly let me know because my phone is the camera is off. So
You are not only audible, you are poetic.
yes. So I, to trace to see he is in the fellowship of the genius. Somerset Maugham, a great novelist, had a great point. He said, in a century, there are one or two geniuses, rest are talent. Now, if we want to identify in the 20th and the 19th century these geniuses, or from 15th, 16th, genius philosophers, there are few, one or two in the whole century. I would say Saran echoes them. That's why, and for example, in 20th century, if we go by the most powerful, most impactful two philosophers, they are Heidegger and Wittgenstein. And both are fundamentally one with Saran on their distrust of modernity and its claims. Both have a project of a critique of both reason and modernity and what we call so-called science and all that. And so, for example, let us see the major critiques of enlightenment, which are respectfully heard throughout the world. But then I wonder why Traditionalists are not given the proper space. See, modern man is confident of the. Fine. This is one of the articles that had appeared on this. For key postulate that was Professor Saran's, which he tried to identify in a modernity and then to question it. That was the postulate of non-mediated universal knowability, which was modern man's claim. That's why he wanted to demystify the world. Rene Guénon has defined rationalism as a project of demystifying the world. And now the faith has been defined by the great mystics as thankfully accepting the mystery of the world. That's why God is mystery or nothing. This is what stays for a great mystic philosopher who has written on mysticism and philosophy, that famous book. He has written it. So the point is that when mystery is tried, when we are not comfortable with the mystery, then man is gone. Man has been fundamentally defined as, for example, by another great thinker who very few people care to read, Eric Vogelin, that great political philosopher. Fundamentally, man is a question oriented towards transcendence. The very fact that man is ever oriented towards defines him. Otherwise, he's subhuman. Now, this question, this to be openness to the real, to the sacred, is what defines human. Now, when we try to oust mystery from the existence, in a way, man gets exited. So if we see the if we see major critics of modernity, for example, if you see from Burke to Herder to Dostoevsky to Solzhenitsyn to Eric Vogelin, and from philosophers, if you we can count both Wittgenstein and Heidegger and Nietzsche as well, I would say then major postmodern thinkers would also in a way align with them regarding their critique of Enlightenment project, which wanted to create a second reality. Adorno, we know he said Enlightenment, he argued that whole thesis in that great book with his co-author, Hoppheimer, Enlightenment is totalitarian. So Foucault was able to identify that Enlightenment's definition of reason is extremely narrow. It in a way, tried to marginalize the whole realm of unreason, which is the mystical, the feminine, and all those things. Isaiah Berlin, we know he characterized Enlightenment project as monist. There has been also Lewis Strauss, though his position is in a way different, Enlightenment for battling against revealed religions. So McIntyre and others have also charged the project of modernity with foundationalism and nihilism. Nietzsche's diagnosis was also correct that fundamentally nihilism is a possibility which is not easy to overcome from a modernity or what we call the postmodern trajectory. And we know our own Gandhi, who said Western civilization is an interesting idea. And he called it in a way satanic. It was in fact T.S. Eliot who said Enlightenment is a devil-inspired movement. Maybe we would not go that far. We would say it is an overstatement. And there are such great theologians as Protestant theologians like Paul Tillich, who have tried to in a way read theologically the idea of Enlightenment and the modernity. And then we have Althusser and others who have tried to even read some meaning in the idea of death of God and try to appropriate Christian atheism. There have been such movements, but what my point is, all great thinkers, all great poets, let us take, for example, Yeats. He was so fundamentally distrustful of modernity's this rationalistic claim. That's why he was so open to the occult and all that. But then that occult is itself a problem. That fascination with the occult. Rene Guénon has a whole book on theosophy, and there's a very critical book. Modern man's fascination with the occult and the parapsychological is itself a problematic thing, but that I cannot take that here. So if you take, for example, major writers, Samuel Beckett, James Joyce, they're all critical of modernity. Even Albert Camus, I would say. Now, how do we now come to Saran? Saran is critical of almost everything which is holy, which is in a way considered sacred in modern academicians' imagination. He's critical of Nehru. He's critical of Marx-inspired these movements, and he's critical of the Hindu right. We know his great paper on crisis of Hinduism, and he has many papers on Gandhi and Gandhism and all that. What he has been fundamentally trying to say that both secular dogma, the secularist fundamentalism, and this religious fundamentalism, they are fundamentally deviations from what is called a traditional constant. So tradition is, metaphysics is prior to religion. Religion has to accommodate individuality and the emotion. Then that's why scriptures have a use for this poetic and all those devices, figures of speech. But metaphysics is pure truth, may not be able to be digested by those who have fundamentally a desire for solace. That's why metaphysics never transcends religion. So then who try to make a whole reaction out of religion and try to make its own politics. Now there's been a profound there has been a profound comment on modernity, that is everything is looked from a political angle. See, agar of literature, if you go from literature departments, literature criticism, from new historicism to cultural materialism, there also politics is everywhere. That it is in philosophy, it is in everywhere. But the problem is why this point needs to be historicized in turn. When we share religion and politics ought to be kept separate or they can coexist and all that, Saran has a beautiful note in his notes on secularism. He has tabulated all these positions on the meaning of secularism and how it is either logically untenable or in any way, if we are serious about accepting the claims of world of tradition, world of revealed religions, world of all these Semitic and non-Semitic people who claim allegiance to some higher truth, then we cannot accept the reigning idea of secularism in whatever form, Nehruvian and in any form it is being presented. But we hardly see any serious criticism of this position in our this academia. So I was wondering about that. But I am also wondering, is it possible if you could carry forward dialogue with Professor Mehta, who was a Heideggerian scholar, a great Heideggerian scholar of India. I think he has been also marginalized. He has a great book on Heidegger. Now, since he had been properly trained in that Vedantic and all that lore, then he tried to approach the greatest of the modern figures, Heidegger. Then he could somehow appropriate certain elements. But that is a trajectory I think that we have not been able to try about that. I am not sure what would have been Saran's response, because Heidegger is also somehow distrusted by major traditionalist thinkers, though I do not think they have very seriously read. Most of them, they have not seriously commented on in detail on him. So I'm not sure if they have seriously read him. So, but for example, there are so many notions in Heidegger which would have been in a way Saran's, which Saran would have owned, but then it would have been a very nuanced critique of modernity. Except, for example, the embracing of the technology. Technology, which we know Heidegger had a great distrust of it, but then he said it is going to stay there. It is going to stay. So we can't disown it. So in any way, we have been all modernized to this or that extent by embracing this or that technology. So how is it then possible? For example, we are using this phone. Heidegger ideally would have problem with this, so would have Saran. So use of technology. Technology has already fashioned us. Now, is it possible to read this movement in theological terms? I think here Protestant theology has we need to take those resources forward. They have a more open-ended view of modernity. So trying to dismiss it wholesale, that is itself a gesture that needs to be in a way more, I think that needs to be questioned, because modernity is not of one piece and it has many nuances and it has many internal dialectic. But if we identify it as key movement, the way Saran would, for example, unmediated this and that universalization claim that reason is the supreme and all those things, and that science as a meta narrative, then it in a way, and revealed religion had to be pushed to the side, and somehow politics is the key and religion has to accommodate to its dicta. So then they are all problematic from a traditional point of view. And but Saran had some beautiful in a way suggestions for trying to what he called, there is a problem of deadening of the people's noetic sensitivity. Fritjof Schumann had also remarked that modern man is somehow, he does not feel the perfume of the sacred. Now, how in his Illuminations, a school for the regeneration of man's experience, imagination, and intellectual integrity, he tried to argue that for originary noetic innocence, Saran, how he would call for unlearning of modern enlightenment and turning back to the truths eternally inscribed in the nature of things. And that's what mystics and poets have always been trying to do. And that is, for example, he had an idea for 2 3 weeks. We invite certain students who are from various backgrounds. They would be asked to stay together. Then they should study and discuss among themselves some wisdom books for their passage to deepen their understanding. And the idea was to, as Professor Saran says, it is not to inform but to form the mind anew, to de-sediment, renew and redeem the experience, feeling life and imagination of the realm of participants. So the major assumptions of modernity and this, which in the way is the secular discourse, the way are some religious fundamentalists, they have been trying to marry tradition with modernity in many ways. Now that project is fundamentally impossible and flawed. Guinun was so categorical about that, and Saran has a Guinunian streak in him. He is doing that job pretty well. He's blasting this assumption that we cannot marry tradition and modernity. And he expresses it so well in his thesis on Hinduism and crisis of and the Gandhi. Now, I think we need to argue further a few points. Then you kindly stop me when I have to stop. I don't know when time is over.
Maybe another
I'm
5
audible?
minutes. Another 5 minutes, Maroof, please.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. See, what was Saran's point about Gandhi? That he went to the root of the matter and attacked the very concept of rising standard of living. You know, there was a good, Sachs had edited that development dictionary. There is a chapter on standard of living. I think 99% of us have interiorized the notion that we have to raise the standard of living. Now, this is the key problem that Gandhi attacked, that Saran would love to attack. He says Gandhi could see most clearly what this really meant, a continually rising standard of consumption, even to the point where when rapid built in this wanton destruction becomes the controlling principle of the economy. In opposition to this economic theory, he boldly set up a theory of non-possession, non-acquisitiveness, and minimization of the wants. This is the saintly ethic that Gandhi promoted, and that traditions have generally promoted. So no one is with that consumeristic, which is ultimately eco-destructive lifestyle. And Gandhi was both against a capitalist as well as a state-planned socialist production system. This whole planning, that all that Nehruvian project, it has fundamentally these flaws which Saran would point out, but no one would listen to him, not then and neither now. So, in my opinion, to quote Saran, Gandhi's life and thought were completely repudiated by independent India. So, is Saran not able to accept in the post-independent India's developments, or he's absolutely in despair and he's critical of it? He says, I am aware that Nehru often denied this, but I do not know what he was talking about. If the present interpretation of the essentials of Gandhi's social, political, and economic thoughts is correct, the state-planned, centralized industrial technological society which India adopted as her goal is quite contrary to Gandhi's vision of free India. As to the political order, non-violence and truth have not at all been accepted as its foundation. Now, I just would love to read a passage on what has the problem of the right asserting in the name of religion, in the name of tradition, but itself it is a huge distortion. But what it has an element of truth that needs to be accounted for. See, we know ends of religion and politics overlap and converge to a significant extent, not only in traditional cultures, but also in the thought of best known political thinkers from Plato to Aristotle in the Greek world, to Al-Farabi in the Muslim world, to Leo Strauss and Carl Schmitt in the modern world, and Eric Vogelin. Religion has been, in a sense, integrally linked to politics throughout history in all cultures until recently, the emergence of secularism in the West. Secularization as an idea that does not countenance the notion of the sacred or transcendence and prunes culture of all the vestiges of the later, is something that has been highly contested entity, subject to serious criticism from influential thinkers and writers, and it is no longer taken to have been, and is no longer taken to have won the day against the world we displaced. Although as a principle of separation of religion and state constitutions, it is fairly secure in the West and in many Eastern nations. Nation states emerged at a time when religion was beating a retreat from public sphere, and many influential theorists of nationalism like Gellner in Nationalism and Anderson in Imagined Communities have noted inverse proportionality between rise of nationalism and religion. While the battle against religion has been somewhat easier in other cultures, it has not been and cannot be smooth in the Muslim world, for instance. Although political religion is reasserting its importance throughout the world, it is seeking a centricity in certain parts of the Muslim world. Now, here I would love to conclude on this note that the way religion has asserted itself, despite the once we had assumed major thinkers, major sociologists had predicted the demise of religion, now it has been proved wrong. But the way religion has asserted is itself fraught with certain problems. Now, who is one of the most sensitive critics of religion? Who is basically the insider, like Saran, who understands this pathology of religion transforming into an ideology of the right, then in a way becoming a fundamentalism, as then trying to interject or appropriate certain really modern devices of mass propaganda, of preaching, and like that style, and using violence for achieving certain ends. Then that means and ends which Gandhi tried to make both pure, that goes awry. So the point is, are we able to evolve a politics that is respectful, not just respectful, but that is in a way subservient to the sacred? Then that is also, and then a understanding of religion that takes metaphysics as the prior and not religion as the truth, because religion is never the pure truth. Religion is filtered truth. It is filtered through human understandings, human interpretations, and human emotion and individuality. So that is what the point of Saran was. If we really listen to him, we would try. We would love. We can these in a way avoid these twin pathologies of secular fundamentalism and religious fundamentalism. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maroof. As always, you bring so much poetry, depth, and height to us. So you have really got so many very deep questions, and there is a very beautiful invitation for mutual conversation. For example, Professor Pandey's elaboration of Sharan, building on Hindu space, and then your reference to the critique of Hindu life in Saran is very, very deep. So I would again translate very briefly what our dear Maroof has said into Oriya. ଆମର ଭାଇ ଭଉଣୀ ମାନେ ମାରୁଫ ସବୁଦିନ ଭଳି ଭାରି ଗଭୀର କଥା ମାନେ କହିଛନ୍ତି, ଆଉ ସେ ଏତେ ସହଜ ଭାବରେ ଏତେ ସବୁ ଚିନ୍ତା ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଏତେ ସହଜ ଭାବରେ ଯୋଡ଼ିଛନ୍ତି, ସେଇଠୁ ଆମେ ବୁଝିପାରିବା ତାଙ୍କର ଯେଉଁ ସାଧନାର ଗଭୀରତା କେତେ। ସେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଯେ ଯେଉଁ ଚିନ୍ତା କରିବାର ଯେଉଁ କଥାଟି ଥଟ୍ଟା ପ୍ରକୃତରେ କ'ଣ, ସେ ଏକେ ଶରଣଙ୍କର କଥାଟି କହୁଛନ୍ତି, ଥଟ୍ ଇଜ୍ ଫର୍ମ ଅଫ୍ ପ୍ରେୟାର। ଚିନ୍ତା ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରାର୍ଥନା, ଆଉ ସେଇ ପ୍ରାର୍ଥନାରେ ମଣିଷର ଯେଉଁ ବୁଝିବାର ଶକ୍ତିଟି ରିଜନ୍, ସେ ପ୍ରାର୍ଥନାରେ ତାକୁ ଅନେକ ସମୟରେ ତାକୁ ଗ୍ରହଣଶୀଳତା ପାଇଁ ପ୍ରସ୍ତୁତ ହେବାକୁ ପଡ଼େ। ଏବଂ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ଯେଉଁ ମେଟାଫିଜିକ୍ସ ଗୋଟେ ଏକ ବିରାଟ ସତ୍ୟର ଯେଉଁ ପାଇଁ ସାଧନା, ଆଉ ସେଇ ସାଧନାଟିରେ ମୂଳ ହିଁ ରହିଛି ଆମେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଗ୍ରହଣଶୀଳତା ପାଇଁ ପ୍ରସ୍ତୁତ ହେବା। ମୁଁ ମାରୁଫ କହୁଥିଲେ ସେଥିପାଇଁ ମଣିଷକୁ ଅନୁଭବ କରିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ ଯେ ସେ କେବଳ କ୍ରିଏଟର ନୁହେଁ, ସେ ଜଣେ ସ୍ରଷ୍ଟା ନୁହେଁ, କେବଳ ସେ କ୍ରିଏଚର। ସେ କ୍ରିଏଚର ସୃଷ୍ଟ ହିସାବରେ, ସୃଷ୍ଟାର ଜଣେ ସୃଷ୍ଟ ହିସାବରେ ତାକୁ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ସଦା ପ୍ରସ୍ତୁତ ହେବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ। ଏହା ସହିତ ସେ ଯିଏ କହିଲେ କଥାଟି, ଯେଉଁ ଆଧୁନିକତା ଭିତରେ ଯେଉଁ ପ୍ରକାର ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣତା ରହିଛି, ଆଉ ଆଧୁନିକତା ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ପାଖରେ ଭାରି ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାର ଏବ୍ସଲ୍ୟୁଟିଜମ୍ ରହିଛି, ଏଇଟା ହିଁ ଏହା କେବଳ। ଆଉ ଦ୍ୱିତୀୟ କଥାରେ ଏଇସବୁ ଅନେକ ଦାର୍ଶନିକଙ୍କ ମାନଙ୍କ କଥା କହିଲେ, ଯେଉଁଟାକି ଭାରି ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ। ଆଉ ତୃତୀୟ କଥା ସେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଯେ ଆମର ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ଆଧୁନିକତାରେ ସବୁ ଜିନିଷକୁ କେବଳ ରାଜନୈତିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ଦେଖାଯାଏ, ଯେମିତି ଆଧୁନିକ ସମୀକ୍ଷାରେ, ସାହିତ୍ୟ ସମୀକ୍ଷାରେ ତାର ରାଜନୈତିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ନଲେଜ ଆଣ୍ଡ ପାୱାର, କ୍ଷମତା ହିଁ ସବୁଠାରୁ ବଡ଼ କଥା। କିନ୍ତୁ ଆମର ସେଇଥିରେ ଗୋଟେ ପାରମ୍ପରିକ ଚିନ୍ତାରେ କ୍ଷମତା କେବଳ ସବୁ କିଛି ନୁହେଁ, ଯେମିତି ଆମେ ଆଗରୁ ଆଲୋଚନା କରିଛେ କ୍ଷମତାକୁ ଶ୍ରଦ୍ଧାର ଯେଉଁ ଯାତ୍ରା। ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଭାରି ସୁନ୍ଦର କଥାଟିଏ କହିଲେ ସିଏ, ଯେ ଆଧୁନିକ ମଣିଷର ଯେଉଁ ମନଟି ସେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ, ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ମୁଁ ତାଙ୍କୁ କହିଲି ଏତେ କବିତ୍ୱର ଭାଷାରେ ସେ କହିଲେ, ଜଣେ ବିରାଟ ଚିନ୍ତାନାୟକ ଗୁଏନାଙ୍କ କଥାକୁ ନେଇକି ସେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଯେଉଁ ସେକ୍ରେଟ୍ ବା ଯେଉଁ ପବିତ୍ରତାର ଯେଉଁ ଗନ୍ଧ, ଯେଉଁ ସୁଗନ୍ଧ, ସେଇ ସୁଗନ୍ଧକୁ ଶୁଙ୍ଘିବା ପାଇଁ ଆଧୁନିକ ମଣିଷର ଇନ୍ଦ୍ରିୟ ମାନ ସେଗୁଡ଼ା ସବୁ ମାନେ ଡେଡ୍ ହେଇଯାଇଛନ୍ତି। ମାନେ ସେ ଇନ୍ଦ୍ରିୟ ମାନେ ଇନ୍ଦ୍ରିୟ ଶୂନ୍ୟ ହେଇଯାଇଛନ୍ତି। ଆମର ଘ୍ରାଣ ଶକ୍ତିଟି ସେମିତି ଲିଭି ଲିଭି ଯାଇଛି। କରୋନା ହେଲେ ଯେମିତି ଆମେ କିଛି ଶୁଙ୍ଘି ପାରୁନା ବା ଜୀବରେ ଆମର ସ୍ୱାଦ ନଥାଏ, ସେମିତି ଯେଉଁ ସେକ୍ରେଟ୍ର ଯେଉଁ ବିରାଟ ସ୍ୱାଦ ଆଉ ଗନ୍ଧ ତାକୁ ଆମେ ଇଏ କରିପାରୁନା। ଏବଂ ସେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଶେଷରେ ଯେ ମେଟାଫିଜିକ୍ସ ଯେଉଁ ପରମ ସତ୍ୟ ସେଇଟା ହିଁ ସତ୍ୟ। ଧର୍ମ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ପରମ ସତ୍ୟ ନୁହଁ, କାହିଁକି ଧର୍ମ ଯେଉଁ ପରମ ସତ୍ୟ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଧର୍ମର ଭୂମିକୁ ଆସୁଛି ସେତେବେଳେ ସିଏ ସୀମା ଭିତରେ ପରମ ସତ୍ୟଟି ଧର୍ମ ଭୂମିରେ ଆସୁଛି। So very deep thoughts Maroof has gifted us as always. So now it is a joy to invite Amit. Amit, please.
I think he's not there.
And did you speak with him? Did you call him?
Yes, I sent him on mail.
Okay, as Amit is coming, so let us continue our conversation. So there are already very interesting possibilities for conversation. For example, I'll just leave these thoughts to discuss further as we listen to other friends. So when Professor A.K. Pandey was building on the idea of modernization or limits of modernization of Hindu tradition, and how does it interact with the theme of modernization of Indian tradition as cultivated by Professor Yugendra Singh, for example? And what would be a possible dialogue between Yogendra Singh and A.K. Saran? And then let us listen to some other friends, please participate. And I request you, those of you who would like to speak, to share your interest. We have with us Gyanluigi from Vienna. So let me invite Gyanluigi, please, to share his thought. Gyanluigi.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes.
me? Because I have some problems with my audio, unfortunately. Well, I thank you very much. It was very interesting. And well, if I could ask a question, I would like to know something more about the question regarding Socrates, because I heard in a moment in which my audio was a little bit disturbed because there are some problems here. And in the first intervention, I had the impression that Socrates was mentioned. I would like to ask some question about the relationship, the possible relationship with Socrates, because I am not sure that that I have correctly understood the question about Socrates. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Professor Pandey, would you like to clarify this reference to Socrates? Okay, maybe as Professor Pandey is coming, I think, dear Ganluigi, Professor Pandey was offering an analogy between A.K. Saran and Socrates, and how both of them, they were always against pretense, like that pretense of certainty or pretense of knowledge. So even if the whole crowd is saying something, and they were against. Okay, so we would take it forward. Professor Pandey would also speak. And now let us have some more reflections, please. So I think in our midst, we have with us Santosh Kumar Mishra. So I request Santosh to share some thoughts. And I request all speakers to take 1 to 2 minutes to share a thought or ask a question. So Santosh, please. Santosh, okay. He's taking some.
Yeah.
Yes, Santosh. And in the meantime, those of you who like to ask a question, please put it on the chat box. And I request Ranjit to kindly make a note of it. Santosh, please be quick.
Yes, thank you, Ananta, and regards to all. Actually, I have no question to put. I enjoyed the speeches, both the speeches, and actually, this encouraged me to know about Professor Saran. So I think in recent times, in recent future, I can go through what Professor Saran is saying about the tradition and modernity, all these things. So thank you all.
I think
Let
one,
me know.
one possible dialogue is that as Saran's openness to Gandhi to that extent, and this is a thought for both Maroof and Professor Pandey, that his possible dialogue with, for example, Sri Aurobindo, and Sri Aurobindo's journey with tradition and modernity, and Sri Aurobindo cultivated synthesis of yoga, for example, and he drew deeply on tradition, on modern, and a possible future. So now we have with us Sushriyapa, please. Sushriyapa. Okay. Now we have Minati, please. Minati. Randir, please mute everybody. There is a lot of sound. So Minati, please.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. So it was a very, listening to all the insightful deliberation was a learning experience for me. As I have not, I don't have, I have very little knowledge about A.K. Saran. So just I want to ask, or you can just discuss this question. Just I want to ask whether they believe in the spirit of self-sacrifice for a better world. Whether can this spirit of altruism, fortitude, and the self-sacrifice pave way for a new eco-friendly lifestyle, or we can call it a equitable world or better society. So I just want it discussed whether it was there, because all our religious texts are filled with narrative of all this tremendous sacrifice and resilience. Then the power of faith in divine actually binds all the, all the elements of society to rise the great heights. So actually the Buddha sacrifices his kingship. Jesus crucified himself, and Ram gave up and went to exile. So how this fit into his social theory, and I want to quote from something, whether it is modernity or it is tradition. So I think the responsibility should be to remove the grief from of all the creations. So I'll read a quote from Sun Myung Moon, like, let us carry in ourselves a heart of parents and the body of a servant, and let us sweat for the sake of earth and tears for the sake of mankind. Never forget that we carry on our shoulders the historical cross. So this question can be discussed. If the time permits, later I will read out some poetry that is not related to this, just for to maintain my record.
Thank you, Minati. Very,
Yeah.
very deep question, the theme of self-sacrifice and tradition. And also, not only self-sacrifice, but sacrifice. Sacrificing the innocent. And the great sociologist Peter Berger wrote about pyramids of sacrifice. So where is the sacrifice in both tradition and modernity? That is, now we had a very appreciative comment from Asif Saha. So Asif, I invite you to share your thoughts, please, Asif. Asif ji. Okay. I see Nilufar Amin. Nilufar ji, would you please share your thought? Okay. So now I invite Randeep to please share
Yes.
his thought. Randeep.
Oh, thank you so much. And yes, I'm very much agree with Maroof Shahab that Professor, not only Professor A.K. Saran, but Indology in general, they are being marginalized. Maybe there are so many regions. But my question is with related to sociology of knowledge. As you know, A.K. Saran was deeply engaged with the question of knowledge, particularly with the work of Saylor and Karl Mannheim. So my question is uh, in the context of truth and ideology relation. Means, of course, we have whole Frankfurt School and Horkheimer to Adorno, who deeply engaged with the question of the confrontation between truth and ideology in terms of knowledge. How A.K. Saran visualize the solution to this confronted problem between truth and ideology. Another very important question which I want to ask about methodology, because if you see the Mannheim's, Karl Mannheim's, methodology is a kind of very much, say, he ignored the whole common sense knowledge and other components of received wisdom. So how A.K. Saran approach towards common sense knowledge in that sense. And I don't think that A.K. Saran totally, ignored the question of dharma, as Maroof sir identified. For him, dharma is the basis of society, and metaphysics remain the queen of sciences. and the whole advancement of positivism, and we can see how sociology is totally submitted herself from the idea of positivism. So sociology ignored the dimension of philosophical insight, incorporating its methodological perspective. So A.K. Saran contribution would be like he tried best to incorporate psychological dimension or philosophical dimension into the discipline of sociology. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy. Now I request Jagatjyoti, please, Tapu, to share some thoughts.
ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ ଅନନ୍ତ ଭାଇ। ମୁଁ ସବୁ ଶୁଣୁଥିଲି ଏବଂ ନୂଆ ନୂଆ କଥାଟା ଶରଣ ଏକେ ଶରଣ ବିଷୟରେ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ମିଳିଲା, ତେଣୁ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ। ନୂଆ ନୂଆ କଥା ଶୁଣିବାକୁ ମିଳୁଛି ଏବଂ ତାକୁ କିଭଳି ନିଜ ଜୀବନରେ ଇମ୍ପ୍ଲିମେଣ୍ଟ କରିହେବ ସେ ବିଷୟରେ ଅନେକ ଗଭୀର ଚିନ୍ତନ ସବୁ ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କ ପାଖରୁ ଶୁଣିବାକୁ ମିଳୁଛି। ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ।
ଆଉ ଶ୍ରୀ ଅରବିନ୍ଦଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ କୁ ନେଇକି ସେ ବିଷୟରେ ଦୁଇ ପଦ କହିବ କି? ତୁମେ ତ ଶ୍ରୀ ଅରବିନ୍ଦଙ୍କୁ ପଢୁଛ, ଏଇଟା ଶୁଣିଲା ପରେ ମାନେ ଶ୍ରୀ ଅରବିନ୍ଦଙ୍କ ଛାତ୍ର ହିସାବରେ ତୁମ ମନରେ କଣ ଭାବନା ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହଉଛି? Okay, now we have Dr. Kirot Moharana with us from University of Allahabad. So Kirot Babu, please.
Thank you, Professor Giri. It was really a very I would say wonderful lecture on a topic which is very dear to my heart regarding what exactly is the aim of social science, the methodology that we have been following, and the critic of Enlightenment project and all those things. In fact, I have been very much into this, though I have not actually could produce anything academically on that. Very little I have achieved, but I'm really interested in this area. One thing, especially the last speaker from Kashmir, the way he presented about Professor Saran, it actually touched my heart. That's what I even wrote here, that in fact there is a we as like academician or people who are into philosophy and all, they have a kind of they are trying to understand in a different way, but for a common man, for an average person, what is seen outside or what is there outside is basically responsible for creating a kind of personality in him. For an average man, especially, basically technology is there in front of him. If I am an average man, average person, then for me it's basically technology around me, and from that I create a kind of assumption that science is the ultimate truth, because it is happening, it's there, everything is like on the basis of rationality, on the basis of empiricism. So this is sometimes that comes to mind in my mind, that what is the way out? Because most people see technology, the success of technology, and accordingly the entire politics and what the state is doing, everything is actually modeled according to this belief, this system of thinking. So that is what, if someone can answer that, what is the way out, that it's not that the materiality that we are pursuing is not everything. And see, climate change is happening, that's a different way of approach. Some negative thing is coming.
So Kirot Babu, your question is helpful. So maybe we'll elaborate it on another occasion. Is it okay?
Okay, okay.
So thank आपनको video टा टिके on करंतु. We would like to see you, our friends.
Okay, okay.
So very quickly ମୁଁ ଆବେ ଆମର ସନ୍ଧ୍ୟା ଆପାଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରୁଛି. ସନ୍ଧ୍ୟା ଆପା.
हाँ हेलो
हेलो.
ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ସନ୍ଧ୍ୟା ସମୟର ମୋର ପ୍ରଣାମ. ଆଜି ଆମ ଗଳରେ ଉପସ୍ଥିତ ଯୋଉ ଆମର ସୋସିଆଲ ଥଟ୍ସ ଅଫ କେ ସାରେନଙ୍କର ତାଙ୍କର କଥା ଉପରେ ଯୋଉ ଆମର କହିଲେ ପ୍ରଫେସର ଅଜିତ ପାଣ୍ଡେ ତାଙ୍କ କଥା ମାନେ ବହୁତ ଭଲ ଲାଗିଥିଲା. ତା ସହିତ ଆମର ମାରୁ ଭାଇଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ କଥା ମାନେ ଆଧୁନିକତାର ଯୋଉ ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣତା ଏଇ କଥାଟା ମତେ ବହୁତ ଭଲ ଲାଗିଥିଲା. କାରଣ ଆମେ ସବୁ ସେଇ ଆଧୁନିକତା ଭିତରେ ଯାଉଛେ ଆଉ ସମସ୍ତେ ଅନୁଭବ କରୁଛେ ଆମର ଅସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣତା. ସେ କଥାଟାକୁ ସିଏ ଭାରି ସୁନ୍ଦର ଭାବରେ ଉପସ୍ଥାପନ କଲେ. ତା ସହିତ ଯୋଉ ମଣିଷ ମନଟି ତାର ପବିତ୍ର ତାର ଗନ୍ଧକୁ ଯୋଉ କେମିତି ବାରି ପାରୁନି ସେ କଥାଟି ମତେ ବହୁତ ଭଲ ଲାଗିଥିଲା. ବାସ୍ ଏତିକି ମତେ ବହୁତ ଭଲ ଲାଗିଛି. ମୋଟା ଆଜି ସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଆଲୋଚନାଟି ବହୁତ ସୁନ୍ଦର ଲାଗିଛି.
ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ. So our dear friend Sandhya Appa said that the whole incompleteness of modernity and man's inability to sense the perfume of the sacred. So ମୁଁ ଏବେ ପ୍ରଭାତୀ ଅପାଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରୁଛି. ପ୍ରଭାତୀ ଅପା.
ଭାଇ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ମୋର ପ୍ରଣାମ. ମୁଁ ତ ଶୁଣି ନାହିଁ ବିଶେଷ, ଖାଲି ଅଳ୍ପ ଟିକେ ଶୁଣିଥିଲି. ଆଜି ପ୍ରାୟ ମୁଁ କ୍ଲାସ ଟା ଶୁଣି ପାରିଲିନି ଠିକ ସେ. ଯୋଉ କଥା କହୁଥିଲେ ସେ ଯୋଉ ମାନେ ପରମ୍ପରାକୁ ନେଇ ଆଧୁନିକ କଥା, ତ ସେଇଟା ଉପରେ ମୋର ବି ଟିକେ ଡାଉଟ ରହିଛି. ଯଦି ପରମ୍ପରା ନ ବଦଳିବ ତ ତାହେଲେ ଗୋଟେ ଆଧୁନିକର ଡେଭଲପ କେମିତି ଯେ ହେଇପାରିବ, ସେଇଟା ହିଁ ମୋର କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ. ଆଉ ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ମାନେ ମୋ ଭିତରେ ରହୁଛି. ଆଉ ଏଇଟା ମୁଁ ଶୁଣିଲି ଆଉ କ୍ଲିୟର ଟେ ଠିକ ସେ ମାନେ ମାନେ ବସି ପାରିଲିନି ଆଉ ବୁଝି ପାରିଲିନି. ନହେଲେ ଆଉ କିଛି ମୁଁ କହିଥାନ୍ତି. ଭାରି ଭଲ ଲାଗୁଛି ବଟ ଆମେ ତ ବୁଝି ପାରୁନୁ ଟିକେ ନା, ସେଇଟା ହିଁ ଅଡୁଆ ଲାଗୁଛି ମତେ. ଏତିକି କହୁଛି.
ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ ପ୍ରଭାତୀ ଅପା. So Professor Pandey, Prabhati Appa, a friend from Odisha, is asking a very important question. She's saying that unless tradition is changed, that how modern can be developed. So ମୁଁ ଏବେ ଅନୁରୋଧ କରୁଛି ଚନ୍ଦନ ଭାଇଙ୍କୁ, ପ୍ଲିଜ ଚନ୍ଦନ ଭାଇ. ଚନ୍ଦନ ଭାଇ.
हेलो.
हाँ चंदन भाई.
ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ନମସ୍କାର. ଏଇ ଆଲୋଚନାରେ ଭାରି ଗୋଟେ ବଡ ଦିଗ ମୁଁ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ କଲି. ଭଲ ବୋଲି ତ ମୁଁ କହିବିନି. ଇଏ ଗୋଟେ ଆଲୋଚନାଟି ପ୍ରାୟ ଗୋଟେ ଅନ୍ୟ ପ୍ରକାରର ଆଲୋଚନା. ଏତେ ଗଭୀର ଆଲୋଚନା ଆଉ ତାକୁ କଣ କୁହେ, ଅନେକ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ପ୍ରସଙ୍ଗକୁ ଛୁଆଁ ଯାଇଛି ଆଉ ସେଗୁଡ଼ିକୁ ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଯାସରେ ପରିଣତ କରାଯାଇଛି. ଗୋଟିଏ ନିର୍ଯାସ ଆଉ ଭାରି ଗୋଟେ ଅଲଗା ପ୍ରକାରର ଉଦ୍ବେଳନକାରୀ ଆଲୋଚନା. ଏବଂ ହିନ୍ଦୁତ୍ୱ ବା ହିନ୍ଦୁ ଯୋଉଟା କଥା ରିଲିଜିଅନ କଥା କୁହାଯାଉଛି, ରିଲିଜିଅନକୁ ଆମେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଯୋଉ ଆନୁଷ୍ଠାନିକତା ତା ସହିତ ଯୋଡି ହେଇକି ରହିଛି, ଧର୍ମ ସହିତ ଗୋଟେ ଆନୁଷ୍ଠାନିକତା ଯୋଡି ହେଲେ ଯେ ଧର୍ମର ପରିଚୟ ବଢେ, ଧର୍ମ ନିଜର ସ୍ୱୀକୃତି ହାସଲ କରେ, ଏହାକୁ ଆଉ ଗୋଟିଏ ପ୍ରକାରରେ ମଣିଷ ଭାବି ପାରିବ ଯେ ଆନୁଷ୍ଠାନିକତା, ଭବିଷ୍ୟତର ଆନୁଷ୍ଠାନିକତା କଣ? ଧର୍ମଟି ମଧ୍ୟ ରହିବ, ଆନୁଷ୍ଠାନିକତା ମଧ୍ୟ ରହିବ। ସେ ଆନୁଷ୍ଠାନିକତାର ସଂଜ୍ଞା ଏବଂ ପରିଚୟ ହେଉଛି ଗୋଟେ ଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାରର। ତେବେ ଯାଇ ସହାବସ୍ଥାନ ଆଉ ସହଭାଗିତା ସମ୍ଭବ ହେଇପାରିବ। ଏତିକି ମୋର କଥା।
Our dear Chandan Bhai, Dr. Chandan Kumar Singh, is an activist and thinker, and he is raising a very important question to both Professor Pandey and Maroof. He is saying that yes, the limitations of religion and limitations of institutional religion But what would be a possible alternative institutions in the future? What would be an alternative kind of collective arrangement? So we have had some questions with us. So I would now request Professor Pandey to share some thoughts on these questions, and then Maroof, please. Professor Pandey. Professor Pandey, can you hear us? Okay. I think Professor Pandey is taking some time. Let me invite Maroof to reflect on some of these questions. Maroof?
Yes, sir.
Please.
So I'm audible?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
But we cannot hear your songs.
I'm so happy that so important observations were made. They are in fact enlightening. We shall be further thinking about them. Maybe a few thoughts randomly. I would just, Saran has commented about this, the theme of sacrifice and the critique of, for example, sati. The point is, in traditions, so many things get malformed, they get degenerated into pathological malformations. One of them, then we try to, justify them in this or that way. Saran is critical of that. He's not upholding all these pathologies that have happened in the traditional world with time. So the point of sacrifice, if I could understand her point, the point regarding sacrifice is the very life of the self is to be sacrificed, to be crossed, is what is to be enlightened. We get our definition from the other. By sacrifice, we come to the very identity of oneself. That was why ethics is the first philosophy. That was why it is the point of Levinas as well. So point is, sacrifice was so central to the pursuit of truth. And another point that was then raised by, I think, Gautamji, and why were or the technology, it is so, we are in a way enmeshed in it and framed in it. So how can we go away from it and argue about metaphysics and all that? I think that's why it was always said philosophy is preparation for death. From Plato, from Socrates, we know it. And Montaigne argued it in one of his very beautiful essays. Philosophy, the literature as well, philosophy, they are preparation for death. Now, Heidegger would also say that one advice he would give to the modern man is that he should be able to contemplate, he should visit graveyards. Now, whereas we are enmeshed in the technological culture, we are unable to appreciate this point of philosophical discourse from millennia till date. Why death is so central to our identity, to our self-realization, to our self-discovery. If we are in Arabic, we call dunya what is so near, and we call akhirah the other world, the eternity, which is in a way far. That's why intellectual pleasures are not normally pursued with such a rigor as sensory pleasures. It was even Epicurus. Epicure was ready to concede this point. Intellectual pleasures, higher pleasures. Now it is in fact a curse of modern man if he says technology or empirical method solves our problems, or we are in a way easily able to see their fruits. So we should take them too seriously. Man by definition is someone who gives primacy to intellect, known to the senses. That is, and to the death, and to the life in way which is always conscious of death. That was always the point of this great philosophers from Plato to Wittgenstein to Heidegger. I think another point was Gautamji's regarding this, what he called, I think I forgot that. try to make some important another point. I forgot that. So
truth and ideology relationship.
yeah. Truth and ideology. I think there are 2 points regarding it. All transcendental truths are in a way unsayable. If we can, that's why negative theology is so central to the metaphysics. That's why Derrida comes close to it, and we have a dialogue with major metaphysicians, with postmodern thinkers. For example, there is a book on Ibn Arabi and Sufism, with dialogue with Ibn Arabi. So Derrida and Ibn Arabi in dialogue. So point is, we have in the Vedanta that famous distinction between lower and higher truth. Now all truths are ideological. Whatever human conceptual truth, that is by definition ideological. It has some presupposition, in a way all knowledge is presupposition full, no knowledge is presupposition less. But what is called normally ideology, it inflects all human endeavors and interpretations. That's why Shankara has been interpreted by our great contemporary scholar, whom no one reads, I think, or very few read, who has written that Faustian man. He has written a commentary on Shankara in 4 or 5 volumes. Faustian, the truth speaks to the word speaks to the Faustian man. I forgot the name of the scholar who has written that wonderful work. So
I remember
that
Maroof. I remember
Yeah.
his name, Dept Salya. I think Dept Salya from Jaipur. You are
Yeah. Professor?
Dept Salya from Jaipur, a colleague of Daya Krishna. I think you are referring to that.
He has written. I am reminded of another. He's still alive. He's in Delhi. He was teaching literature in Delhi. He has written this 5-volume commentary on Shankara. The words speak to the Faustian man. The way he has interpreted in first 60 or 70 pages, wonderfully, the point is all conceptual truths, all linguistic truths, everything that is ever propositionally put or framed in any human discourse is what is known to revelation. So Shankara invites us to what we call unmediated, which is not in a way, but to affirm that unmediated is in any way to relativize all human truths. So by definition, in a way, we are forced to conceive that all truths that have ever been postulated by humans and the human interpreters of the scripture, they are in a way provisional, they can be ideologically inflected. So we need to be skeptical. We can afford to be skeptical or critical about them. That's why truth is reserved alone for the absolute, and absolute is what has never been defiled by human speech. So this was how Ramakrishna would put it. Absolute has never been defiled by human speech. And our Ibn Arabi's great students, and I would say elaborator, that Al-Jili would say, nothing can be said about it capital it. So the point is, the truth has been hijacked, tried to be in a way, all dictators, all totalitarian, all those ideologically, politically motivated people who try to in a way speak in the name of truth or the divine truth or whatever, they are to be in a way questioned. We cannot take them too seriously, because truth belongs to the transcendent, and that truth is what we in a way affirm existentially. That is not in the realm of propositions, in the realm of ideologies and the political, what is sold in the TV shows. So it is very profound distinction that whatever we encounter in the world is somehow ideologically fixed, and our job, and to be enlightened, to get nirvana, one has to move out of these conceptual webs, and that is a radical openness to the reality, and that gives us real joy, and that gives us the real, in a way, peace. And that peace is the peace of illumination that comes with the knowledge itself. In a way, in Quran we say God is Assalam. That's a resting place, a refuge, a peace. When one realizes the self, the higher self, one comes to that peace, and that peace itself justifies itself that we have arrived somewhere. So that was my point.
Thank you, Maroof. Thank you. A very
Thank you
quick
so much for Thank you so much.
It is okay. I'll very quickly translate in a line to Odia because his thoughts. So then we would invite Devendra. You know, we always make Devendra wait a long time, you know. So now ଆମର ଭାଇ ଭଉଣୀ ମାନେ ମାରୁଫ ଭାଇ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଆମର ମିନତି ଅପା ଯୋଉ ସାକ୍ରିଫାଇସ୍ କଥାଟି କହିଲେ ଆଉ ସେ କହିଲେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ପରମ୍ପରା ଭିତରେ ଅନେକ ରୁଗ୍ଣତା ପଶି ଯାଇଛି ଯେମିତି ସତୀ ଅମୁକ ସବୁ ଆଉ ସାକ୍ରିଫାଇସ୍ ନାଁରେ ଆମେ ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କୁ ହିଁ ସାକ୍ରିଫାଇସ୍ କରୁଛୁ କିନ୍ତୁ ତା ସହିତ ଗୋଟେ ଆତ୍ମ ଉତ୍ସର୍ଗ ଆତ୍ମ ବଳିଦାନ ସେଇଟା ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଆମର ଜୀବନର ପରିଚୟ ପାଇଁ ଆବଶ୍ୟକ ଆତ୍ମ ବଳିଦାନ ଦେଇ ହିଁ ଆମେ କିଏ ନିଜକୁ ଅନୁଭବ କରୁ ଏବଂ ସେଇଟାକୁ ବୁଝେଇବାକୁ ଯାଇ ସେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଦର୍ଶନ ଏବଂ ସାହିତ୍ୟ you can kindly mute everybody
Yes. Yes.
so ଦର୍ଶନ ଏବଂ ସାହିତ୍ୟ ସେଇଟା ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଆମକୁ ଆତ୍ମ ବଳିଦାନ ପାଇଁ ପ୍ରସ୍ତୁତ କରିବା ଦରକାର ଏବଂ ଆତ୍ମ ବଳିଦାନ ସହିତ ଆମର ମୃତ୍ୟୁ ପାଇଁ ଆମକୁ ପ୍ରସ୍ତୁତ କରିବା ଦରକାର ଏବଂ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ହାଇଡିଗର ଯୋଉ ବିରାଟ ଦାର୍ଶନିକ ସେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଆଧୁନିକ ମଣିଷଟି ସେ କେବେ ଗୋଟେ ଜାଗାକୁ ଯାଏନି କିନ୍ତୁ ସେଠିକି ଯିବା କଥା ସେଇଟା ହଉଛି କବରସ୍ଥାନ ଶ୍ମଶାନ ଆଉ ଶ୍ମଶାନକୁ ଗଲେ ହିଁ ଆମେ ବୁଝିପାରିବା ଜୀବନର ମହତ୍ତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ କେତେ ମହତ୍ତ୍ୱପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ କଥା ମୋର ଗଭୀର ବନ୍ଧୁ ମାର୍କସ୍ ବୁସି ଅଷ୍ଟ୍ରେଲିଆରେ ତାଙ୍କୁ କେବେ ଆମେ ଡାକିବା ଆମ ସହଚକ୍ରକୁ ସିଏ ବି ଏଇ ସମ୍ପର୍କରେ ଭାରି ସୁନ୍ଦର କଥା କହିଛନ୍ତି ଏ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ଶ୍ମଶାନ ଆମେ ଯେମିତି ଯାଉଥିବା ଆମ ଶିବଙ୍କ ସହିତ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଆମେ ତାଣ୍ଡବ ନୃତ୍ୟ କରିଛୁ ବା କିଛି ଶିବଙ୍କୁ ଭଲ ପାଉ ତାକୁ ଶିବ ଶ୍ମଶାନରେ ମିଳନ୍ତି କେବଳ ମନ୍ଦିରରେ ନୁହେଁ ଶ୍ମଶାନରେ ଶିବଙ୍କୁ ଅନୁଭବ କରି ଗୋଟେ ନୂତନ ଜୀବନର ଅର୍ଚ୍ଚନା ଆଉ ଟ୍ରୁଥ ସତ୍ୟ ଏବଂ ଆଦର୍ଶ ସେ ଭିତରେ ଭାରି ବଡ଼ କଥାଟି ସେ କହିଲେ ଯେ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ ସବୁ ଯେଉଁ ପରମ ସତ୍ୟ ସେଟାକୁ କହି ହୁଏ ନାହିଁ ଆଉ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ କହୁ ସେ ତା ଭିତରେ କିଛି ନା କିଛିଟା ଗୋଟେ ଅପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣତା ଆସିଯାଇଥାଏ ଏବଂ ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ଯେ ଆମେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯେଉଁ ସେଇ ଯେଉଁ ପରମ ସତ୍ୟକୁ ଆମେ ଅନୁଭବ କରିବା କେମିତି ଶଙ୍କର ଯେଉଁ ସାଧନା ଥିଲା ସେଇ ଯେଉଁ ଅନମିଡିଏଟେଡ୍ ଯାହାକୁ ପ୍ରକୃତରେ କହି ହୁଏ ନାହିଁ ଅବର୍ଚ୍ଛନୀୟ ଆଉ ମାନେ ଯୋଉଠିକି ସେଇକୁ ଆମେ କେମିତି ଅନୁଭବ କରିବା So now Devendra please you can kindly share your thoughts and then Minati would read quickly a poem and then you can kindly briefly give your vote of thanks. So Devendra please. Dr. Tiwari.
Dr. Devendra, are you there? Perhaps he is taking some time. Meanwhile, I would request Miniti Pradhan to kindly recite her poem.
Yeah. So this is a forced reading from my side to listen everyone. So this is also from my book A New Dawn. The title of the poem is Traveler. Solo traveler, but I have kept it as traveler. Traveler, the soul traveler, starts journey on the road without a co-traveler, finds the hidden treasure. Traveler, the solo traveler, starts his journey on the road without a co-traveler, finds a hidden treasure of being oneself, a mind to think, a body to care, and a walk to dare. To discover and empower self and others in the world, grow and make the experiences on their own without the boundaries and the glass ceilings, to blend in local and turn global. To blend in local and turn global, not to reach the destination alone. To live, to love, and enjoy every movement in mobility, raising the trust and shedding inhibitions, and grab the opportunity of a solitary walk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minati. And Ranveer and friends, if it is okay, I'll just take a few minutes to read a poem on metaphysics, as we talked about. And it is called Practical Metaphysics. Practical metaphysics. Why be afraid of metaphysical? Why such antipathy to universal? Metaphysics is not just an idea. It is not simply conceptual, nor is it only an ideal. It is experiential. It begins with our experience, takes us to further heights and depths, being and being, being of being non-being, and to our nurturing threads, connecting to both the unique and the universal. Practical metaphysics, practical universality. We become a Bodhi tree, roots of it points to and comes from the sky. Bodhi tree and the upwardly rooted Aswastha meet in our eyes, meet in our lives. We become the two birds, dancing with these trees, one witnessing, one eating. We also become the third, bird and bird, BIRD and BARD. And of course, now with the presence of Ranveer and Maroof, we can add bird, bird, and beard. And how,
Yes.
how the beard also can be metaphysical. Flying and singing, a new root of the metaphysical. That means the beard becomes new root of the metaphysical. Husserl and Sri Aurobindo, Tagore and Kumaraswamy, Lush Irigare and Mata Amritanandamayi Devi dance together in our song of a new humanity. Now Dr. Tiwari has come. Dr. Tiwari.
Ananta bhai, I would like to say something in a lighter note.
Okay.
So, as you said, beard, you had previously beard also, right? So that is the sign of intelligence, or
This is a question to be embraced.
Yes.
So now Dr. Tiwari.
You are not audible, Dr. Tiwari. Yes. Kindly check your microphone.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Sir, really it was a very thought-provoking discussion, and one observation I have noted, and in the light of that observation, as a man of literature, so I would like to present something from literature. Sir, while listening the lecture by Professor A.K. Pandey sir, propounded that there is a conflict between modernity and religion. Means modernity and religion cannot go together. And same idea has been presented by one famous poet of 18th century, father of neoclassical age, Alexander Pope. In one of his famous essay, although it's not an essay, it's a poem, but title is Essay on Man. So few lines of that poem I would like to recite with your kind permission. The title of the poem is Essay on Man. And the very first line is, know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man. Placed on this isthmus of a middle stage, of being darkly wise and rudely great, with too much knowledge for the skeptic side, with too much weakness for the stoic pride. He hangs between doubt to act or rest, in doubts to deem himself a god or beast. In doubt, his mind or body to prefer, born but to die, and wrestling but to err, alike in ignorance, his reason such, whether he thinks too little or too much, chaos of thought and passion, all confused, still by himself abused or disabused, created half to rise and half to fall, great Lord of all things, yet a prey to all, sole judge of truth in endless error hurled, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world. So this has been my observation. Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kindly give the vote of thanks. Dr. Tiwari?
Maybe Randhir, you can,
Yes.
maybe there is some connection problem.
Yes, maybe a network issue.
Sir, I'm done.
Yes,
With my word.
yes, kindly give the vote of thanks, Dr. Devendra.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So please, as there is some problem with my audio, so once again, I request you to confirm whether I am audible. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
Sir, is my voice?
Yes, audible.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Sir, thank you very much for asking me to propose the vote of thanks. I am Dr. Devendra Tiwari, faculty member of School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Raffles University in Neemrana. It's my honor and privilege to extend this vote of thanks on this August moment. To begin, I would like to thank Professor Ranveer Gautam, Head of School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Raffles University, and convener of this dialogue. Professor Anand Kumar Giri, Professor at Madras Institute of Development Studies, the moderator of today's dialogue. I'm thankful to both of you for giving me this opportunity to express this vote of thanks. Now, on behalf of School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Raffles University, Neemrana, Rajasthan, India, and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, I would like to thank our distinguished guest and speaker of today's webinar, Professor A.K. Pandey, Department of Sociology, PhD, Varanasi, India. I would like to express my deep felt gratitude and thanks to Dr. Muhammad Maroof Shah from Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir. I express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Amit Sharma. So although sir could not connect due to some network issue, but I also express my thanks to his good self also. I bow my head in gratitude to Professor Anand Kumar Giri sir for moderating the session and keeping it alive throughout from the beginning to the last. I express my sincere thanks to all the distinguished speakers of today's webinar for their thought-provoking deliberations on the topic social thoughts of A.K. Saran. Now, I would like to express my gratitude to our Chief Patron, Revered Dr. Justice Meena Vigombar ma'am, for being the source of inspiration and motivation for organizing such kind of activity. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Professor Diwakar Kohli, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Raffles University. I express my vote of thanks to active participants, guests, audience, and everybody who contributed in making this program materialize. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the convener of this event, Professor Ranveer Gautam, and moderator, Professor Anand Kumar Giri sir, for initiation and execution of such a wonderful dialogue. Thanks all of you from bottom of my heart. Finally, thanks a lot once again to everybody, and I wish you all a very happy time. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you
So,
all.
namaste everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And a very quick announcement. So let us also prepare ourselves for next Sunday, which is July 18. And we are having Dr. Karl Giri of K, a very deep scholar from Germany, who will speak with us on Rudolf Steiner. So lovely. Looking forward.
Thank you so much. Namaste. Khuda Hafiz. Bye.
Gracias.